Have you ever had that feeling? That unsettling feeling when you just know that something is wrong, that you are being watched? This is not a story I tell often. This is the story of the woman who lived in the shadows of my new home. The woman who turned my safe haven into a nightmare. This is what happened. My name is Liam. After saving up for what felt like forever, I finally moved into a new place. It was a shared housing space, a decent-sized building where professionals and students lived. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. The first few days were exactly what you'd expect. Unpacking boxes, trying to remember which switch turned on which light, and awkwardly introducing myself to my new housemates. Everyone seemed nice, normal. The caretaker, a man named Mr. Evans, was a bit quiet, but helpful. For the first week, everything was peaceful. But that peace was shattered the moment I saw her. She began to appear more frequently. I'd see her in the garden, just standing and staring at my window. I'd catch a glimpse of her in the hallway outside my door, her footsteps silent on the carpet. The most terrifying incident happened one night. I was up late, working on my laptop. A feeling of being watched crept over me. I pulled back the curtains slightly and looked down into the street. And there she was, standing right in the middle of the empty road. Her head tilted upwards, staring directly at my window. The streetlight cast an eerie glow on her pale face. She didn't blink. She didn't move. She was like a statue, a monument to pure unease. I dropped the curtain, my heart hammering in my chest. What did she want? Why was she always watching me? I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was mentally unwell. Maybe she was just eccentric. I even asked Mr. Evans about her. He brushed it off quickly, saying, "Oh, that's just my relative." His dismissiveness felt off, but I had no proof of anything wrong, so I tried to ignore it. I started keeping my curtains closed. I would listen at the door before leaving my room. The sense of dread was becoming a constant companion. It all came to a head on a rainy Thursday night. I was exhausted from a long day and fell into a deep sleep. Sometime around 3 a.m., a sound jerked me awake. It was a soft, dull thud, then another. It was coming from inside my room. My blood ran cold. I lay perfectly still, straining my ears in the darkness. The room was silent except for the sound of the rain tapping against the window. Then I heard it again, a faint, scraping noise. It was coming from my closet. I held my breath. Was it a rat? The building was old. It was possible. But then I heard something else. Breathing. Slow, shallow, raspy breaths. It was unmistakably human. Someone was in my closet. Someone was in my room. I had to know. I had to see. Slowly, silently, I slid out of bed. The floor was cold beneath my feet. The only light was the faint glow of the streetlights filtering through the curtains. I took a step towards the closet, then another. My hand trembled as I reached for the closet doorknob. I took a deep breath and yanked the door open, and there she was, crouched among my hanging shirts and jackets, surrounded by my shoes. It was the woman. Her hollow eyes were wide open, reflecting the dim light. In one hand she clutched a large, rusty kitchen knife. The blade glinted faintly. Around her neck, tied tightly, was a man's silk necktie, pulled so taut it looked like it was choking her. She didn't scream. She didn't yell. She just stared at me with that same blank expression. But now up close, I could see a terrifying intensity behind it. Time seemed to stop. Then, in a sudden, violent motion, she launched herself out of the closet at me. The knife swung in a wide arc. I stumbled backward, falling onto the floor. She was on top of me in an instant, her weight surprisingly strong. I grabbed her wrist, fighting to keep the knife away from my face. I could smell a strange, musty odor on her clothes. I yelled for help, my voice cracking with panic. The commotion woke my housemates. My door burst open. Mark and Chloe from across the hall rushed in. Seeing the scene, Mark didn't hesitate. He tackled the woman off of me, wresting the knife from her grasp. Chloe helped me up, her face white with shock. The woman didn't fight back much once she was overpowered. She just went limp, her head lolling to the side, the necktie still digging into her skin. We held her down until the police and an ambulance arrived. The room was a mess. A lamp was knocked over. Clothes were scattered everywhere from the closet. I was shaking, a cut on my arm from the struggle slowly bleeding. When the police questioned Mr. Evans, the truth finally came out. The woman was indeed his relative, his older sister. She had severe, untreated schizophrenia and had lived in a care facility years ago. He couldn't afford the fees anymore, so he had secretly moved her into the building's basement storage room years ago, illegally. He'd been bringing her food and water, but her condition had worsened. She had become increasingly paranoid and obsessive. The police said she had fixated on me, the new person, as a threat. The necktie, it belonged to a previous tenant who had left it behind. They found her makeshift room in the basement, a small, sad space with a cot, a few belongings, and newspapers covering the walls. Mr. Evans was arrested for endangerment and violating about a dozen housing laws. His sister was taken to a proper psychiatric facility. I moved out the very next day. I couldn't sleep in that room another night. I still think about her sometimes, not with anger, but with a deep, profound sadness. She was a sick woman who needed help, hidden away in the darkness. But I also remember the sheer terror, the feeling of violation, of my safest space being invaded. It changed me. Now, I always double-check my locks. I still get a jolt of fear if I hear an unexpected noise at night. It reminds me that sometimes the most frightening things are not supernatural monsters, but the very real, very human secrets hiding in plain sight. If you have your own story, share it in the comments below. And if you want to hear more true tales of the strange and unsettling, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss what comes next. Stay aware and stay safe. What if you found out you weren't alone in your own home? Not because of a ghost or a spirit, but because of a person who was never supposed to be there. This is the story of the hidden tenant, the one who lived in the shadows of my own apartment. It's a story that didn't begin with a bang, but with a whisper. A misplaced glass, a missing bite of food, the subtle, almost imperceptible shifting of the air in a room you thought was yours alone. It's about the erosion of sanity, the slow, methodical dismantling of the concept of safe space. This is my story. And if you've ever felt a chill down your spine for no reason, or the faint, nagging sense that something is off, you might understand why even now I still look over my shoulder. The city was called Brookside, a name that promised gentle streams and shaded lanes, but delivered a sprawling post-industrial grid of brick and asphalt. I arrived in August, the air thick and hazy, the sun a bleached white coin in a sky the color of concrete. My car, a 10-year-old sedan I'd christened the Relic, was packed to the roof with my life. Cardboard boxes of books, a duffel bag of clothes, a milk crate of mismatched kitchenware, and a single, forlorn succulent named Spike that had survived my college years. I'd taken the first job that was offered, a junior analyst position at a data firm called Synergen. It wasn't a passion, but it was a paycheck, a foot in the door of adulthood. The apartment hunt had been a demoralizing parade of shoeboxes with stained carpets and rents that demanded my entire first month's salary. Then I saw the listing for 4B at 17 Elm Street. The photo showed a living room with high ceilings, tall windows, and what looked like original hardwood floors. The rent was a full $200 less than anything comparable. It felt like a typo, a cosmic error in my favor. The building itself was a 3-story brownstone, wedged between a laundromat and a vacant storefront, with newspapers yellowing in the window. It had a certain tired grandeur, like an old actor down on his luck. The foyer smelled of lemon-scented polish, and faintly of boiled cabbage. Mr. Roberts met me there. He was a small man, bird-like, with thin white hair, combed carefully over a freckled scalp. His clothes, brown corduroys and a beige cardigan, seemed to blend into the building's muted palette. His hands trembled slightly, a constant, fine vibration. "You must be Leo," he said, his voice softer than I'd expected. "The place is upstairs. Mind the third step. It creaks like the devil." The tour was brief. The apartment was larger than the photos suggested, but darker. The tall windows looked out onto a narrow air shaft and the brick wall of the adjacent building. The living room was spacious, with a fireplace that had been painted shut. The kitchen was a galley-style affair, appliances avocado green from a bygone era, but they seemed functional. Then we came to the second bedroom. The door was solid wood, unlike the hollow core doors of the other rooms, and it was secured by a heavy brass deadbolt. "This one's just storage," Mr. Roberts said, patting the doorframe. His knuckles were swollen with arthritis. The building owner, he keeps some things in here. Old furniture, files, that sort of thing. It's locked up. You've got the run of the rest of the place, of course. A flicker of disappointment. But 2-bedroom would have been great for a home office or for guests. But the price was for a 1-bedroom plus storage, and it was still a steal. "That's fine," I said. "It's a great space." Mr. Roberts smiled, a nervous twitching thing that didn't reach his eyes. He seemed distracted, his gaze constantly drifting towards the locked door, then to the front entrance, as if expecting someone. He kept rubbing his thumb and forefinger together, a self-soothing gesture. "It's a quiet building," he said, almost to himself. "Mrs. Gable in 2A is hard of hearing, and the 3rd floor is empty, being renovated. You'll have plenty of peace and quiet." I signed the lease that afternoon on the kitchen counter, using a box of pasta as a writing surface. Mr. Roberts' signature was a spidery scrawl. As I handed him the copy, our fingers brushed, and his hand was cold and damp. "Welcome to 17 Elm, Leo," he said, folding the paper carefully and tucking it into his cardigan pocket. He hesitated at the door. "If you need anything, well, my number's on the lease, but it's best to call after noon. Mornings are busy." Then he was gone, and I was alone in my new home. The silence was immediate and profound. It wasn't a peaceful silence, but a heavy, waiting silence. I walked to the locked door and placed a hand on it. The wood was cool and smooth. Storage, I thought. It made sense. I pushed the unease aside. This was paranoia, the natural anxiety of a major life change. I was a grown man, with a job and an apartment. The world was full of locked doors. The first week was a blur of orientation at Synergen and unpacking. The office was a fluorescent-lit maze of cubicles, the air humming with the sound of computers and hushed conversations. My colleagues were pleasant, but distant, their lives already full. I'd come home exhausted, the silence of the apartment a welcome relief from the office drone. I'd eat a frozen dinner at the small Formica table, the scrape of my fork echoing in the empty space. I'd watch videos on my laptop, the glow of the screen my only companion. I told myself this was independence. This was what I had wanted. But the apartment never quite felt like mine. It felt borrowed. The previous tenant had left traces. A ghostly outline on the wall where a large painting had hung. A small rust-colored stain on the bedroom carpet near the window. A single bent coat hanger in the closet. I felt like an imposter, playing house in someone else's life. And always, there was the locked door. It was a blind spot in my peripheral vision, a question mark at the end of the hallway. I found myself positioning my chair to face away from it. I started calling it the void in my head. It was just a room, I'd tell myself. Just a room full of old things. But at night, in the absolute dark of a city that never truly sleeps, I'd lie in bed and listen, Sometimes, I'd hear the old building settle, a creak, a pop, and once, a sound so faint, I convinced myself I dreamed it. The soft, metallic scrape of a key turning in a lock. Not the front door. A smaller, closer lock. I held my breath, my heart hammering against my ribs. But there was only silence. Just the old building, talking in its sleep. I rolled over, pulled the covers tight, and blamed the city stress. It was my imagination. It had to be. The first incident was so trivial, I dismissed it instantly. It was a Tuesday, about 10 days after I'd moved in. I'd made a pot of coffee, poured a mug, and left the empty carafe on the burner. I was running late, a constant state of being in those early weeks. I rushed out the door, my mind already on the day's spreadsheets. When I returned that evening, drained and hungry, I went to make a new pot. The carafe was in the sink, clean, dripping wet. I stood there, staring at it. Had I washed it? I have a very specific, slightly lazy routine. I rinse the carafe and leave it in the sink to deal with later. I never wash it immediately. It was a tiny deviation, but it was my routine. I stood there for a full minute, reconstructing my morning. No, I was sure. I'd left it on the burner. The explanation formed easily. I'd done it on autopilot. Stress, new job, my mind was elsewhere. I shrugged it off, but a seed of doubt had been planted. A few days later, it was the food. I'd bought a loaf of sourdough bread. I'd had 2 slices for toast on Wednesday morning. When I went to make a sandwich on Thursday night, the loaf was noticeably smaller. A quarter of it was gone. The end piece, which I always leave, was missing. Again, the rationalization was swift. I must have eaten more than I thought. Maybe it had settled. Maybe I was just hungrier than usual. But the doubt was sprouting. I started paying closer attention. I began a silent internal inventory. The level of the orange juice, the number of yogurts in the fridge, a bag of pretzels I was sure was half full, was now nearly empty. I was a creature of habit, my diet monotonous. It was easy to track. Then came the sounds. It started with the coughing. I'd woken up around 2 a.m., my throat dry. I lay in the dark, listening to the distant wail of a siren, and then I heard it. A dry, rattling cough. It wasn't loud, but it was close. It seemed to come from the other side of my bedroom wall. The wall I shared with the locked room. My blood went cold. I sat bolt upright, every sense screaming. I heard it again. A cough, followed by a soft, wet sniffle. Mrs. Gable is hard of hearing. Mr. Roberts had said. The 3rd floor is empty. The cough hadn't come from above or below. It had come from beside me. Slid out of bed. My heart, a frantic drum against my ribs. I crept to my bedroom door and peered into the dark hallway. The apartment was silent. The strip of darkness under the locked door was absolute. No light, no sound. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a thick geology textbook from my college days. and moved through the apartment, turning on every light. The living room was empty. The kitchen was empty. The bathroom was empty. I stood in the hallway, facing the locked door. I pressed my ear against the cool wood. Nothing. Only the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. "Hello," I whispered, my voice cracking. The silence swallowed the word. I felt a fool. It was the plumbing. It was the wind. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Gable, and the sound had traveled through some weird ductwork. Old buildings are full of noises. I was a grown man, hiding in his hallway with a textbook. The shame was almost as strong as the fear. Went back to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the textbook on the nightstand beside me. The next day at work, I was a zombie. My concentration was shot. I made stupid mistakes in my data entries, earning a gentle reprimand from my supervisor. I decided to conduct an experiment. That evening, I deliberately placed things in specific positions. I left a pen on the edge of the coffee table, its tip pointing directly at the leg of the sofa. I arranged the magnets on the fridge in a particular nonsensical pattern. I took a photo of the kitchen counter with my phone before I left for work the next morning. The day was interminable. I couldn't focus. All I could think about was my apartment. Was someone in there, right now, going through my things, sleeping in my bed? The thought was so violating, it made me nauseous. I rushed home, my keys clenched in my sweaty hand. I burst through the door, my eyes scanning the living room. The pen was still on the coffee table, but was it still pointing at the sofa leg? I couldn't be sure. It seemed to have shifted slightly. The magnets on the fridge were still in their pattern, but one, a letter Q, seemed askew. The kitchen counter looked exactly as it had in the photo. It was all ambiguous, nothing definitive. That was the true horror of it. It was a gaslighting performed by the universe itself. The evidence was always just soft enough to be denied, just vague enough to be explained away. I was trapped in a cycle of suspicion and self-doubt. Was I going crazy? Was this what a nervous breakdown felt like? The pristine, rational world of data analysis at Synergen felt a million miles away. Here, in my own home, logic was failing me. The final straw of this phase was the smell. It was a Friday night. I'd ordered Chinese food and fallen asleep on the sofa watching a movie. I woke up around 3 a.m., disoriented. The TV was off, the apartment dark, and then I smelled it. The unmistakable, acrid scent of cigarette smoke. Not fresh, but stale, as if someone had been smoking earlier and the odor had lingered. I don't smoke. The windows were closed. I got up and walked through the apartment, my nose in the air. The smell was strongest in the hallway, right outside the locked door. It was faint, but it was there. I stood there, breathing it in, a cold certainty settling in my stomach. I wasn't imagining this. I wasn't stressed. I wasn't crazy. There was someone on the other side of that door. The locked door was no longer just a door. It was an obsession. It became the focal point of my life, the mystery I had to solve. My work suffered. My social life, nascent as it was, withered. I declined invitations for after-work drinks, preferring to go home and watch and wait. I started studying Mr. Roberts' patterns. He came by the building every Tuesday and Friday morning, usually between 10 and 11, to collect mail, and I assumed, check on things. I thought about calling in sick on a Tuesday to see what he did, but I was still on probation at work and couldn't risk it. Instead, I began a more systematic surveillance of the room itself. I examined the doorframe for scratches, the lock for signs of wear. I noted that the deadbolt was new, its brass finish shiny and unscuffed, a stark contrast to the old, tarnished doorknob. It had been installed recently. One evening, emboldened by a glass of whiskey, I got down on my hands and knees and peered through the keyhole. It was blocked. Something was shoved into the other side. A piece of cloth, maybe. Deliberately obstructing the view, that sent a fresh chill through me. Someone didn't want to be seen. I started listening at the door at different times of the day. During the day, it was silent. But at night, between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m., I would sometimes hear things. Not loud things, not conversations or footsteps, but the faint, almost subliminal hum of electronics. A low, rhythmic vibration that I eventually identified as the muffled bass from a television or radio. Once, I heard the soft clink of a glass or a bottle. I tried to engage Mr. Roberts. The next time I saw him, a Tuesday morning, I was taking out the trash as he was sorting mail in the foyer. "Morning, Mr. Roberts," I said, trying to sound casual. He jumped, startled. "Leo, you're not at work?" "Running a bit late. Hey, I had a quick question. I think there might be a pest problem. I've been hearing scratching noises in the walls, especially near the second bedroom." His face, already pale, went ashen. He stopped sorting the mail, his hands still. "Scratching? Yeah, and I think It was a test. I watched him closely. A normal landlord would express concern, maybe suggest an exterminator, maybe offer to check the room. Mr. Roberts did none of those things. He became agitated, his hands trembling more than usual. "It's an old building," he said sharply, not meeting my eyes. "You get noises. It's just the pipes. And that room is sealed tight. Nothing could get in there. It's just a storage room, son." He repeated the phrase like a mantra. "Just a storage room. Would you mind taking a look? Just for my peace of mind?" I pressed. "I don't have the key on me," he said quickly, patting his pockets as if to prove it. "The owner has it. It's not a problem. I'm sure it's nothing. Don't worry about it." His dismissal was absolute. It was the reaction of a man with something to hide. The conversation confirmed everything I feared. The room was not just storage, and Mr. Roberts was in on it. The mystery now had a shape, and it was terrifying. Who was in there? A squatter who had found a way in? A relative Mr. Roberts was hiding? The possibilities were dark. A criminal. A person with severe mental issues. The more I thought about it, the more I realized my vulnerability. This person had a key. They had access to my home while I slept. They had been eating my food. They had been listening to me live my life. The violation was absolute. My home was my sanctuary, and it had been poisoned. I couldn't relax. I started taking my laptop into the bathroom with me. When I showered, I locked my bedroom door at night, jamming a chair under the knob. I bought a cheap set of webcams, the kind used for baby monitors, and set one up in the living room, pointing at the front door and the hallway, streaming to my phone. For a few days, nothing happened. The camera showed an empty apartment. I began to think the occupant of the room had been scared off by my confrontation with Mr. Roberts. Maybe it was over. The live feed from the living room camera flickered. The image was grainy, in black and white. I saw a shadow move across the wall. My breath caught. I watched, frozen, as the front door opened, not with a bang, but silently, slowly. A figure slipped in. It was too dark to make out features, just a tall, thin silhouette. The figure moved quickly, purposefully, across the living room and into the kitchen. I heard faintly through my phone and through my bedroom door the sound of the fridge opening. They were back. I watched, my heart pounding, as the figure emerged from the kitchen holding something, walked down the hallway, and stopped right outside my bedroom door. The camera angle from the living room only caught the end of the hallway. I saw their shadow lengthen as they stood there, just on the other side of the wood. Were they listening to me? Could they hear the movie? I muted the TV. The silence was deafening. I saw the shadow move again, and then a key scratched in the lock of the other bedroom. The door opened. A sliver of dim light spilled into the hallway, and the figure disappeared inside. The door closed. The lock turned. I had them. I had proof. But what good was it? It was a grainy video of a shadow. I could show it to the police, but what would they do? They'd likely dismiss it as a roommate or a guest. They might even alert Mr. Roberts. I felt trapped. I was a prisoner in my own bedroom, afraid of the stranger in the room next door. The next morning, after I was sure the occupant had left, I heard the front door open and close around 6 a.m. I examined the hallway. Outside the locked door, on the floor, I found a small brown feather. It was from a pigeon or a sparrow. What was it doing there? And then, near the baseboard, I saw a few tiny dark crumbs. I knelt down. They weren't crumbs. They were dead flies, a small cluster of them, as if they had been swept into a pile. It was bizarre and unsettling. The pieces of the puzzle were not forming a clear picture. A shadowy figure, cigarette smoke, dead flies, a feather. It was like trying to describe a monster by its discarded parts. The not knowing was a special kind of torture. My imagination, fueled by fear and isolation, began to conjure horrors far worse than reality probably held. I wasn't sleeping. I was losing weight. The circles under my eyes were permanent fixtures. I was a ghost in my own life, haunted by the living. I needed irrefutable, tangible proof, something I could hold in my hand and show to the authorities. The video was not enough. I needed to prove that this person was not just entering my apartment, but interacting with my things, specifically my food. The milk carton idea was born from a memory of a detective novel. It was simple, elegant. I bought a new half-gallon of milk. Before I put it in the fridge, I took a fine point permanent marker and made a tiny blue dot on the bottom seam of the carton, right near the expiration date. It was invisible unless you were looking for it. I drank a glass that night, noted the level, and went to bed. The next day, I came home from work and went straight to the fridge. The milk was on the middle shelf, where I'd left it. But the level was wrong. It was down by at least 2 glasses. My throat tightened. I took the carton out, my hands trembling, and turned it over. My blue dot was there. But right next to it, almost overlapping, was a second dot. Fainter, made with a different pen, maybe a ballpoint. A shaky, hesitant imitation. The confirmation was like a physical blow. I stumbled back and leaned against the counter, the cold carton in my hand. It was real, all of it. Someone was drinking my milk, trying to cover their tracks by making their own mark and putting it back. The sheer mundanity of it was what made it so chilling. This wasn't a ghostly apparition. It was a person engaged in the banal act of theft, trying to be clever. The fear curdled into anger. A hot, pure rage. This was my home. I paid the rent. I was living in a state of constant anxiety while some stranger treated my life like a convenience store. I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. I called Alex. Alex had been my roommate in college, a pragmatic, level-headed engineering major who didn't believe in anything he couldn't calculate. I needed his skepticism. I needed his calm. "Dude, you sound terrible," he said when I called him that night. "I need your help," I said, my voice shaky. I laid it all out. The sounds, the smells, the milk carton, the grainy video. I expected him to laugh, to tell me I was working too hard. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Okay," he said finally, "that's seriously messed up. You're sure you're not just sleepwalking or something?" "Alex, I marked the milk. There are 2 dots. Another pause. "Right, okay. What's the plan?" We devised the trap. It was simple. The next day, a Wednesday, I would leave for work as usual. Alex would drive up from the city and park a few blocks away. I would meet him, and we would sneak back into the building together. We would hide in my bedroom closet and wait. We would catch the intruder in the act. The night before, I didn't sleep a wink. Every sound was amplified. Every creak was a footstep. I was a bundle of raw nerves. When my alarm went off, I felt nauseous with exhaustion and anticipation. I went through my morning routine like an automaton. Shower, coffee, toast. I made a point of being slightly louder than usual. A performance for my unseen audience. Another day at the office, I said to the empty ... apartment. My voice sounding false and tinny. I left at 8:15 sharp. I walked to the end of the block, my skin crawling with the feeling of being watched from the windows of 4B. I rounded the corner and slid into Alex's waiting car. He looked sober, concerned. "You good, man?" he asked. "No," I said honestly. "But let's do this." We waited 20 minutes to ensure the occupant would think I was long gone. Then we walked back to 17 Elm, trying to look nonchalant. The foyer was empty. We took the stairs 2 at a time, wincing at every creak. I fumbled with my keys, my hands slick with sweat, and finally got the door open. The apartment was exactly as I'd left it, silent, waiting. "This is it," I whispered, pointing down the hall to the locked door. Alex nodded. His jaw set. We went into my bedroom and into the walk-in closet. It was cramped and dark, full of the smell of clean laundry and dust. We left the door open a crack, giving us a narrow view of my bedroom door and a slice of the hallway beyond. We settled in on the floor, our backs against the wall, and then we waited. The first hour was agony. Every minute felt like an hour. We communicated in whispers and hand signals. The closet grew warm and stuffy. My legs cramped. The initial adrenaline faded, replaced by a grinding boredom and a growing fear that we were wrong, that nothing would happen, that I was crazy and had dragged my friend into my delusion. Just after 1 p.m., I was about to suggest we give up. My bladder was full. My back ached, and then we heard it. It wasn't the front door. It was a sound I hadn't anticipated. A soft, sliding sound, like a window being quietly opened. It came from the living room. We hadn't heard anyone come up the stairs. How did they get in? Footsteps, light and careful, barely a whisper on the hardwood. They moved through the living room and into the kitchen. We heard the refrigerator door open, the clink of glass, the door closing. The footsteps began again, moving down the hallway towards us. This was it. Alex gripped my arm. My heart was trying to beat its way out of my chest. The footsteps didn't stop at my bedroom door this time. They walked right past our closet and stopped at the locked door. We heard the jingle of keys, the scratch of metal in the lock, the creak of the door opening. Then, silence. They were inside. The door didn't close. We waited, holding our breath. Why wasn't the door closing? And then we heard a new sound. A low, wet, gurgling sound, followed by a voice. It was a man's voice, raspy and thin, worn down by smoke and disuse. He was talking to himself. "Gotta be careful. Gotta be quick. He's a smart one, marking his things. Gotta be more careful." The voice was laced with a strange mixture of paranoia and childish glee. It was the voice of someone unwell. Then The footsteps started again, leaving the room. The door remained open. The figure was coming back down the hallway, but this time, he was heading for my bedroom. For my room. The shadow fell across the crack in our closet door. The doorknob to my bedroom began to turn. The doorknob turned slowly. The door to my bedroom began to swing inward. Adrenaline exploded through my system, burning away the fear and fatigue, leaving only a white-hot imperative. Move. Now, I hissed to Alex. We burst out of the closet, shoving the door open so violently it slammed against the wall. The figure in my doorway froze, silhouetted against the light from the hallway. It was a man, tall and gaunt, dressed in dirty jeans and a faded flannel shirt. His face was pale and hollow-cheeked, his eyes wide with shock. In one hand, he held my box of expensive granola bars. For a split second, we all stood there, a frozen tableau of violation and discovery. Then, the man let out a strangled cry, dropped the granola bars, and turned to flee. "Stop!" I yelled, lunging after him. He was fast, scrambling down the hallway toward the open door of the other bedroom. Alex was right behind me. We skidded into the hallway. Just as the man disappeared into the room, we were seconds from following him when another figure emerged from the room, blocking the doorway. It was Mr. Roberts. His face was a mask of sheer, unadulterated panic. His usual tremble was now a full-body shake. He held his hands out, palms up, a gesture of desperate supplication. "Leo, stop, please," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "Get out of my way," I shouted, my voice raw with rage. "There's someone in there, in my apartment." I know. Please just calm down, Mr. Roberts was crying now, tears cutting clean paths through the dust on his cheeks. He tried to block the door, but I was bigger and fueled by a righteous fury. I pushed past him, Alex at my shoulder. The room was a shock. It was not a storage room. It was a cell. A pathetic makeshift living space. A thin, grimy mattress lay directly on the floor, covered with a stained blanket. Empty food containers, water bottles, and cigarette butts were scattered everywhere. The air was thick with the stench of sweat, smoke, and decay. A small battery-powered portable TV sat on an upturned crate, its screen showing static snow. The window was covered with a piece of cardboard, a length of rope tied to the radiator below it, his secret entrance and exit. And on the mattress, curled into a fetal position, was the man. He was sobbing quietly, his shoulders shaking. He looked ancient and childlike at the same time. "What is this?" I demanded, whirling on Mr. Roberts. My anger was now mixed with a profound, unsettling confusion. "Who is he?" Mr. Roberts slumped against the doorframe, defeated. All the fight had gone out of him. "He's my son," he whispered. The words hung in the foul air. The pieces, the terrible, tragic pieces, began to fall into place. "His name is David," Mr. Roberts said, his voice a broken monotone. He slid down the frame to sit on the floor, not caring about the filth. He's sick. He has been for a long time. Addiction, schizophrenia. The doctors, the medicines, nothing worked. He lost his job, his apartment. His wife left him. He looked at his son, his expression a mixture of love and utter despair. He had nowhere to go. I couldn't afford a care facility. My pension, it's nothing. I was ashamed that I couldn't help my own boy. So, when the last tenant moved out, I thought I could keep him here, just for a little while, until he got better. The story spilled out of him, a confession years in the making. He'd lied to the building owner, saying the room needed to be kept locked for plumbing issues. He'd installed the new deadbolt himself. He'd been sneaking David in and out, bringing him food, trying to manage his illness in the shadows. David's condition was volatile. Sometimes he was lucid. Other times he was paranoid, delusional. The food theft, the strange behaviors, it was all part of his sickness. Mr. Roberts had been replacing the food as best he could, hence the second dot on the milk carton, a pathetic attempt at maintaining the illusion of normalcy. I knew you were getting suspicious, he sobbed. I told him to be more careful, but he gets confused. He thinks people are after him. Sometimes he'd go into your room just to see, to make sure you weren't a threat. Looked from the broken old man on the floor to the broken young man on the mattress. My rage evaporated, replaced by a hollow, aching sadness. This wasn't a malicious intruder. This was a tragedy. A father's desperate, flawed, and ultimately destructive attempt to save his son from a world that had no place for him. The monster in the room next door was just a sick, scared man, and his keeper was a heartbroken father. Alex put a hand on my shoulder. "Leo?" he said softly. "We need to call someone." I nodded, numb. I called the police. But when they arrived, I didn't report a break-in. I reported a man in need of psychiatric help and an elderly man who needed social services. The aftermath was a blur of uniforms, questions, and paperwork. Paramedics gently led a docile, confused David away on a stretcher. Mr. Roberts was taken to the station for questioning. A social worker arrived. The building owner was notified and was understandably furious. I stood in my violated apartment, watching the chaos unfold. The locked door was finally open, swinging on its hinges, revealing the sad truth it had contained. There was no monster, just a profound human misery. I moved out that weekend. The building owner, mortified and facing massive liability, let me break the lease without penalty. He put me up in a hotel for a week while I found a new place. A modern, secure high-rise with a doorman and cameras in every hallway. I didn't care about the character. I cared about the locks. The legal proceedings were slow. Mr. Roberts was charged with building code violations, illegal confinement, and violating the lease. He pleaded guilty to most of the charges. The court, recognizing the mitigating circumstances, was lenient. He was given probation and mandated counseling. The real victory, I was told, was that David was finally properly committed to a state-funded rehabilitation and mental health facility. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was light years better than a locked room filled with garbage and despair. I never saw either of them again. Sometimes I think about trying to contact Mr. Roberts, to see how he's doing, to see if David got better. But I don't. Some wounds are best left to heal without being picked at. Our connection was a dark, traumatic knot, and untying it would serve no one. The experience changed me fundamentally. I am hyper-vigilant in a way that can be exhausting. I check my locks multiple times before bed. I have a sophisticated security system. I am wary of deals that seem too good to be true. The world feels like a less safe place because I learned that danger isn't always a stranger in a dark alley. Sometimes it's a quiet, desperate secret living behind a locked door you walk past every day. But more than the fear, what stays with me is the sadness. The profound, haunting sadness of it all. The image of David on that mattress is seared into my memory. It's a reminder of how thin the line is between our ordered lives and utter chaos. How easily things can fall apart. How love, when twisted by shame and desperation, can become a kind of prison. The forgotten roommate wasn't a monster. He was a symptom of a broken system, a failed family, and a love that had nowhere left to go. The true paranoid nightmare wasn't that someone was watching me. It was the realization of what people are capable of hiding and the terrible lengths they will go to for those they love. The horror was in the silence, in the quiet tragedy unfolding, just inches away, separated only by a thin wall and a lock. And the scariest part of all is knowing that behind thousands of ordinary doors in countless ordinary buildings, similar silences are being kept. Similar secrets are living in the dark. If this story unsettled you, if it resonated with that primal fear of the unknown within your own walls, then you understand. The world is full of stories that live in the shadows. Share your own experiences in the comments below. Have you ever felt a presence in your home that you couldn't explain? Have you ever discovered a secret that was never meant for you? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more true horror stories, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new tale. Stay safe, be aware of your surroundings, and above all, always trust your instincts. They are the first, and sometimes the only, warning you will get. I thought moving out would be the end of it. A new apartment in a shiny, secure building. A doorman named Hank who knew every resident by name. The constant hum of a city that felt alive, not sleeping. I thought I could lock the memory of 17 Elm Street away, just like that other bedroom had been locked. But some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed. The fear I felt was a ghost, and it had followed me home. This isn't just the story of what happened next. It's the story of how a nightmare echoes, how a single secret can unravel into many, and how the past never really leaves us. It's the story of the echoes in the walls. My new apartment was on the 14th floor. The windows were double-paned, silencing the city into a dull, respectful murmur. The locks were solid steel, activated by a key fob that also summoned the elevator. Hank, the doorman, was a mountain of a man with a kind smile and eyes that missed nothing. It was safe. It was sterile. And I was miserable. Every sound in this new place was a potential trigger. The hum of the refrigerator wasn't just a hum. It was a hellish hum. It was the masked sound of footsteps. The click of the radiator was the turning of a key. I found myself setting up a new, more elaborate surveillance system. Not to catch an intruder, but to reassure myself there wasn't one. I had 4 cameras inside my 800-square-foot apartment. I'd watch the live feed on my phone at work, my heart skipping a beat if a shadow from a passing cloud drifted across the living room floor. Was living in a gilded cage of my own making. My social life, which had barely begun, was now non-existent. The idea of bringing someone back to my apartment, of having to explain the cameras, the constant checking of locks, was unthinkable. How do you tell a date? Sorry, I just need to make sure no one's son is hiding in the linen closet. Work became my only refuge. The cold, hard logic of data was a sanctuary from the messy, irrational fear that governed my home life. But even there, the paranoia seeped in. I'd catch myself analyzing my coworkers' behaviors, looking for tells, for secrets. Was Janice from accounting being evasive because she was hiding something, or just because it was tax season? The incident at 17 Elm Street hadn't just scared me, it had rewired my brain. I saw conspiracy in coincidence, menace in mundanity. Then, the email arrived. It was from a name I didn't recognize, Eleanor Vance. The subject line was simple, 17 Elm Street. My blood ran cold. I almost deleted it, my finger hovering over the mouse. But the curiosity, that same dreadful itch that had made me press my ear against a locked door, was too strong. I opened it. Dear Leo, it began. My name is Eleanor Vance. I am David Roberts' sister. I know you have no reason to want to hear from anyone in my family, but I am writing to you because I have just learned the full extent of what happened. I live overseas and have been out of touch for some years. I need to understand. If you are willing, I would be grateful for a few moments of your time. I am staying at the Grand Hotel, David's sister. The concept was jarring. In my mind, David and Mr. Roberts existed in a tragic, isolated bubble. I'd never considered they had other family, a world beyond that filthy room. A part of me screamed to ignore it, to let the past stay buried. But a larger part, the part that still lay awake at night seeing David's hollow eyes, needed answers. I replied, agreeing to meet her the next day. The Grand Hotel was all polished brass and hushed voices, a world away from the boiled cabbage scent of 17 Elm. Eleanor Vance was waiting in the lounge, a tall, elegant woman in her late 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that held a deep, weary sadness. She stood as I approached. "Leo," she said, her voice firm but soft. "Thank you for coming. I know this is an imposition." We sat in plush armchairs. A pot of tea arrived on a silver tray. The normality of the scene was surreal. "I only found out a week ago," she began, not meeting my eyes, instead focusing on stirring a single sugar cube into her cup. "My father, he never told me how bad things had gotten with David. We were never close, but after our mother died, the distance became a chasm. He'd send me emails, always brief. 'David is managing. We're doing fine.' I was wrapped up in my own life, my career in London. I believed him. I thought my brother was stable." She took a shaky breath when the police contacted me about my father's legal situation. I flew back immediately, seeing my father. He's aged 20 years. And David, her voice broke. To learn he was living like that, in a storage room, it shattered me. My father, in his twisted, prideful way, was trying to protect us both. He was protecting me from the burden, and he was trying to protect David from a system he didn't trust. He failed catastrophically. I listened, silent. My anger towards Mr. Roberts, which had cooled to a dull ember, now felt complicated by this new layer of tragedy. "My father told me what you did," she continued, looking at me now. "That you called for help for David, not just the police, for yourself. He said you were kind in the end. In his own way, I think he's grateful. I am too. You could have had him thrown in jail. Instead, David is finally, properly, in a treatment facility. I just wanted to feel safe in my own home," I said, the words sounding small and inadequate. "And you should have," she said firmly. "What my father did was unforgivable. But I wanted to meet you for 2 reasons. First, to apologize, sincerely and from the bottom of my heart. The violation you experienced, I can't even imagine. And the second reason?" I asked. She set her cup down. "To tell you that you weren't the first." The air went out of me. "What?" "There was a tenant before you," Eleanor said, her face grim. "A young woman. She only lasted 3 months. When she moved out, she told my father it was because of pests and weird noises. She broke her lease and forfeited her deposit. At the time, my father told me she was just flighty, couldn't handle an old building. Now I think she knew, or she felt it, and she was smart enough to get out. The revelation was a physical blow. I wasn't uniquely paranoid or uniquely unlucky. The nightmare had a history. The hidden tenancy of David Roberts was a recurring event, a cycle of invasion and flight that my stubbornness and need for proof had finally broken. "There's more," Eleanor said, her voice dropping. "After I saw my father, I went to 17 Elm to collect a few of his things from the basement. The building owner, a man named Peterson, was there. He was nervous. When I mentioned your name, he became agitated. He told me to let sleeping dogs lie, and that the building has a history of bad luck. It felt like a warning." She leaned forward. "Leo, I think what happened to you is just the tip of the iceberg. I think my father's secret was just one of many in that building. And I have a feeling Mr. Peterson knows all about them. Meeting Eleanor opened a new, more frightening chapter. It wasn't just about a hidden roommate anymore. It was about a pattern, a building that seemed to attract and hide misery. Mr. Peterson, the elusive owner, was the key. I decided to pay him a visit. I used the pretext of needing a copy of my final utility bill for my taxes. His office was in a sleek, modern building downtown, a stark contrast to the decaying brownstone he owned on Elm Street. Peterson was a man in his 50s, with a sharp, impatient face and the distracted air of someone with more important places to be. When I introduced myself, his demeanor shifted instantly. The impatience was replaced by a cold, wary tension. "Leo," he said, not offering a hand. "I heard you moved into the Orion Towers. Very nice. What can I do for you?" I went through my spiel about the utility bill. He nodded, his eyes never leaving mine, and told his assistant to pull the file. As we waited in strained silence, I decided to take a risk. I actually also wanted to ask, "How is Mr. Roberts?" Peterson's jaw tightened. "Facing his consequences. A tragic situation. But it's being handled." "It must have been a shock for you too," I pressed, "to find out what was happening in your own building." "Roberts deceived me," he said flatly. "He told me that room had a mold issue. I trusted him. It was a breach of trust, and it's been resolved." "Eleanor Vance mentioned you said the building has a history of bad luck," I said, watching him closely. A flash of anger in his eyes. He quickly masked it. "Miss Vance is grieving. She's looking for someone to blame beyond her father. Old buildings have problems. Tenants come and go. That's all." His assistant returned with the paper. Peterson practically shoved it into my hands. "Here you are. Now, if that's all, I have a meeting." I was being dismissed, but as I turned to leave, my eyes fell on a framed architectural drawing on his wall. It was of 17 Elm Street, but different. It showed the original layout from the 1920s, and I saw something that made my breath catch. The second bedroom, my second bedroom, wasn't always a bedroom. According to the drawing, it was originally a large walk-in pantry, accessible through a small service door from the kitchen. The doorway, I knew, had been added later. "Interesting drawing," I said, pointing. I didn't realize my apartment used to have a pantry. Peterson froze. The color drained from his face. He looked for a moment, truly terrified. "It was a renovation done decades ago," he snapped. "Before my time. Now, please. Goodbye." He all but pushed me out of his office. I stood in the hallway, my heart pounding. His reaction was all wrong. It wasn't the annoyance of a busy man. It was the panic of a man whose secret had just been uncovered. What was so frightening about an old pantry? That night, I dove into the city's public archives online. I searched for building permits, old blueprints, anything on 17 Elm Street. It took hours, but I found it. A renovation permit from 1985, filed by a previous owner. It listed the conversion of a first-floor pantry into a secondary bedroom. But that wasn't the interesting part. The interesting part was the name on the permit. The owner who had commissioned the renovation was a man named Arthur Peterson, the current Mr. Peterson's father. And then I found an older document, a news article from 1978 scanned from a microfiche. The headline was small, tucked away on page 14. Boy 8 reported missing in South End. The boy's name was Michael Peterson. He had lived at 17 Elm Street. He had last been seen in the kitchen of his family's first-floor apartment. The article quoted the boy's distraught father, Arthur Peterson, saying his son had a habit of hiding in his favorite secret spot, the walk-in pantry. When he was upset, the boy had vanished without a trace. The pieces crashed together in my mind with horrifying clarity. The pantry, the hidden room, a missing boy. Mr. Peterson's sheer terror when I mentioned it. He hadn't just inherited a building. He'd inherited a family tragedy. A tragedy that had taken place in the very room where, decades later, another lost son would be hidden away. The bad luck wasn't bad luck at all. It was a legacy of silence and grief. Mr. Peterson hadn't just been covering for my landlord. He'd been protecting the dark, secret history of his own family. The room wasn't just a storage room or a prison for David. It was a tomb for a memory, a place where a child had disappeared. And David's presence there felt like a dark, cosmic joke, a cruel echo of a past sorrow. I shared everything I found with Eleanor. We met again, this time in a quiet park. She listened, her hand over her mouth, as I told her about Michael Peterson. "My God," she whispered, "that poor family, that poor boy." So when David was in that room, he was living in a shrine to a tragedy, I finished. No wonder Peterson wanted it all buried. His missing brother, a mentally ill man locked away by a desperate father. It was all too much. Understanding the full scope of the horror didn't erase my fear, but it contextualized it. The paranoia I felt wasn't just about a person. It was about the weight of history, the resonance of sorrow that had seeped into the very walls of that building. I wasn't just afraid of an intruder. I was feeling the echo of a decades-old grief and a more recent, desperate shame. Eleanor and I made a pact. We would not pursue it further. We would not confront Mr. Peterson with what we knew. Some graves are best left undisturbed. She had her brother back in care, and her father was getting the help he needed. I had the answers I craved. The knowledge was a heavy burden, but it was also a key. Slowly, I began to dismantle the prison I had built for myself. I took down one camera, then another. I forced myself to leave the apartment without checking the locks 3 times. I told a simplified version of the truth. I had a bad experience with a break-in. It was cathartic. The world began to feel less threatening. I even went back to 17 Elm Street one last time. I stood across the street, looking at the brownstone. It didn't look menacing anymore. It just looked sad. A tired, old building, holding too many secrets. I saw a "For Rent" sign in the window of 4B. I wondered who would live there next. and if they would ever feel the faint, cold echo of the past, I hoped, for their sake, they would not. The forgotten roommate was David, yes, but in a way, it was also Michael Peterson, the lost boy. And it was me, for those few months, lost in a labyrinth of my own fear. We were all ghosts in that place. Now the echoes are finally fading. I still sometimes double-check the lock on my door. But now when I do, it's just a habit, not a compulsion. The nightmare is over. I have my home back, and more importantly, the story of 17 Elm Street is closed. But the world is full of buildings with secrets. Have you ever lived somewhere that felt wrong? Have you ever discovered a hidden piece of history about your home? Share your stories in the comments below. Your experience might be the key that helps someone else understand their own. If you want to continue this journey into the shadows with me, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. Until next time, stay aware, be kind, and remember, listen to the quietest voices, both in your home and in your mind.